welcome to Simpler Bible, a daily journey to biblical understanding. Can you believe we are on episode 100? This is amazing. We are so grateful that you have been on this ride with us. Today, we're going to look at Psalm 14 and Psalm 53, and you're going, Ryan, why in the world are we doing 14 and 53? Those are really far apart. Yesterday we did 1 and 2. They were right next to each other. You're right. They're very far apart. But the reason we're looking at them is because they both say the same thing. And we want to be able to see how this fits in with the New Testament because Paul uses these texts that we're going to look at today over in Romans. So today's episode is called The Fool, and it is Psalm 14 and Psalm 53. And we will jump over to Romans 3 in just a moment. Here's what Psalm 14 says. The fool says in his heart, there is no God. They are corrupt. They do abominable deeds. There is none who does good. The Lord looks down from heaven on the children of man to see if there are any who understand, any who seek after God. So he's looking for anyone who understands, anyone who's seeking after God. They have all turned aside. Together they have become corrupt. There is no one who does good, not even one. No one is doing good, not even one. So this is a text that you want to go to when somebody goes, well, I think people are basically good, don't you? The Bible does not think that people are basically good. The Bible thinks that there is no one who is good, not even one. And we'll get to that in just a moment. Because you could argue here, well, he's just talking about Israel, but we'll see in a moment that that's not the case. Have they no knowledge, all the evildoers who eat up my people as they eat bread and don't call upon the Lord? There they are in great terror, for God is with the generation of the righteous. I love that. God is with the generation of the righteous. You would shame the plans of the poor, but the Lord is his refuge. Oh, that salvation for Israel would come out of Zion. And it does, right? Salvation comes out of Zion. Zion's the other name for Jerusalem. And then we also know that there's a heavenly Zion, a heavenly Jerusalem in which Christ dwells. So, oh, that salvation for Israel would come out of Zion. When the Lord restores the fortunes of his people, let Jacob rejoice, let Israel be glad. So that's Psalm 14. Now, Psalm 53, same thing. I told you, same thing. The fool says in his heart, there is no God. They are corrupt, doing abominable deeds, iniquity. There is none who does good. God looked down from heaven upon the children of man to see if there were any who understand, who seek after God. They have all fallen away. They have become together corrupt. There is no one who does good, not even one. Have those who work evil no knowledge, who eat up my people as they eat bread and don't call upon God? There they are in great terror where there is no terror. For God scatters, this is where it gets a little bit different. God scatters the bones of him who encamps against you. You put them to shame, for God has rejected them. Oh, that salvation for Israel would come out of Zion. So there's that again. When God restores the fortunes of his people, let Jacob rejoice and let Israel be glad. So this is written twice for us, right? And one of the things that it says in both of these, that the fool says in his heart, there is no God. So whenever you hear somebody go, there's no God, right away you can go, okay, that's a foolish person. That's how foolish people talk. There's a little bit of a reference to this in Psalm chapter 10, maybe verse 4. So the fool says there's no God. It's kind of the same thing, but it doesn't repeat nearly as well as Psalm 14 and Psalm 53. Obviously, they're meant to be kind of the same exact concept. And so the fool in his heart says there's no God. There is no one who is good. There is no one who is righteous. There is no one who seeks after God. Behold, not one. Now, let's jump over to Romans chapter 3. And Romans, man, we're going to get to Romans, so I'm not going to tell you the whole story of Romans right now, but we're going to be in Romans in like 8 months or not 8 months, but like 6 or 7 months. So Romans 1 through 2 is God showing Paul, or Paul's telling the people that everyone is a sinner. Jews and Gentiles both are sinners, okay? And then the beginning of chapter 3, so the beginning of chapter 3, we'll call it 3a, is also talking about this, how Jews and Gentiles are sinners. The last half of 3b, is talking about how righteousness comes by faith. And so Paul is making an argument that the Jews and the Gentiles are all sinners, and that the Jews and the Gentiles all are righteous through faith. And that's a nutshell version of what Paul's talking about in Romans. We will go into a lot more detail when we get there, and I'll remind you of these Psalms. But here's what Paul says in Romans 3. What then? Are we Jews any better off? Not at all. For we have already charged that both Jews and Greeks are under sin. All Jews and all Gentiles are sinners. As it is written, and here's where he quotes Psalm 14 and Psalm 53, None is righteous, no, not one. No one understands. No one seeks God. They have all turned aside. They have all become worthless. No one does good, not even one. Now, the reason that Paul is saying this is because the Jews, as a general rule, believe that, hey, we Jews, we're righteous and the Gentiles are sinners. And what Paul has already done in at the very end of chapter 1, he said that God shows no partiality between the Jews and Gentiles. In fact, in Romans chapter 1, verse 16 and 17, he has said that I am not ashamed of the gospel, for it is the power for all who believe, for the Jew first and also for the Gentile. At the end of chapter 1, he says that those who do good in serving and following God will receive a reward, the Jew first and also the Gentile, but those who reject God will receive judgment, the Jew first and also the Gentile. In chapter 2, he says that the Jews who have the law have not been obeying the law. He goes so far as to talk about how the Jews aren't actually circumcised. You may remember that from when we talked about that. When was that? Deuteronomy, I don't even remember, 12, something like that. It was a long time ago. And so it was Deuteronomy something, maybe Deuteronomy 28. Nope, it was Deuteronomy 30. That's what we're going to go with. Final answer. And so Paul is talking here in Romans 2. He says that the Jews who were circumcised but didn't obey the law, God viewed them as uncircumcised. And the Gentiles who weren't circumcised but obeyed the law, God viewed them as circumcised. And so he asked this question in Romans 3:1. He goes, what advantage has the Jew? What advantage is circumcision? He goes, much in every way, but are the Jews better off than the Gentiles? No. Jews and Gentiles alike are both in need of a Savior. Jews and Gentiles alike both fall into this category of Psalm 14 and Psalm 53. There is no one who is righteous on their own. There is no one who is seeking after God. There is no one who does good. Behold, not one. How many of you have heard somebody say, let's see if I can draw this really quickly. It's going to be really garbage and I'm going to hate it forever, but I didn't think to do this earlier, right? So here we've got this silhouette of a man. And you're going, that is not a silhouette of a man. And right now, my sister Jessie, who mocked me on one of my earlier drawings from Genesis 1, she was like, yeah, that was pretty dumb. So what people do is they think like this. They go, oh, there's this God-shaped hole in all of us. I'm putting the cross because it's going to take me less time than to write out the word God and then fill it in. So what people do is they say, oh, there's this God-shaped hole in all of us, that all of us are seeking after God. All of us are looking for God. All of us are wanting God. No, we're not. So no one understands. No one seeks after God, not even one. No one is looking for God. It's amazing to me how many times this works its way into kind of our evangelistic techniques. And we're like, look, everybody has a God-shaped hole or a God-shaped vacuum in their life. They're trying to fill it with all these other things, all these different kinds of sins. And the only thing that can fill that hole in your heart is God. No one's looking for that. No one is. Everyone has turned aside. Everyone is doing their own thing. Everyone is pursuing their own agenda, their own self, until God comes in and changes them. Paul gets more graphic about it. He says, so not only, he's just quoted Psalm 14 and Psalm 53, and he goes, no one is righteous, no one is good, they're all contrary to God. And he says this, he goes, their throat is an open grave, they use their tongues to deceive. That's from Psalm 5, verse 9. The venom of asps is under their lip. An asp is a small snake. The venom of asps is under their lips. Wow, under their lips. That's not fun to say. That's hard. Asps and lips. See, I'm doing it again. That's from Psalm 140, verse 3. Their mouth is full of curses and bitterness. That's Psalm 10, verse 7. Their feet are swift to shed blood. That's Isaiah 59, 71. And there is no fear of God before their eyes. That's Psalm 36, 1. Paul is ripping like humanity apart and saying, everyone apart from God, this is who we are without God. He'll say later in Romans, he'll say we are by nature enemies of the cross of Christ. He'll say in Ephesians that we are objects of God's wrath. This is who we are without Jesus. So this idea that mankind is basically good, this idea that mankind is really generally okay and seeking after God, the Bible does not agree with it. Paul certainly does not agree with it. And all Jews and all Greeks, and that includes every one of you watching this right now, you are either a Jew or a Greek. All people apart from Christ are under sin. All people are unrighteous apart from Christ. No one understands. No one seeks after God. No one is good. Left to our own devices, we are enemies of the cross of Christ. Our throats are open graves. The venom of asp is under our lips, mouths full of curses and bitterness, feet swift to shed blood, in their paths ruin and misery, the ways of peace they have not known. And he says that this is who people are apart from Christ. And he is using, he quotes Psalm 14 and Psalm 53, which is why I jumped over to Romans 3 today, because he's quoting that there. But he also quotes these other 5 places from the Old Testament, 4 of which come from the Psalms, 1 from Isaiah, to show that there is not a God-shaped hole in us, that all of us left to our own devices are enemies of God. And so that is the nature of mankind. If you're wondering what is the nature of mankind apart from God, you need only read Psalm 14, Psalm 53, and Romans chapter 3 to see that apart from Christ, we don't stand a chance. And so anyway, keep that in mind, and we will be back in the Psalms tomorrow. I look forward to it. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time. Thank you so much for journeying with us today at Simpler Bible. Together, you and I have looked at another passage of Scripture and come to know the Bible a little bit better and enjoy God more fully. This video, along with all of our videos, can be found at simplerbible.com, where you can enjoy our Through the Bible in a Year course. You can also enjoy a wealth of resources, blog posts that take you a little bit deeper into the text, a Bible study format that you can use with your small groups or your family, and we're creating new content all the time, all with the commitment to help us be people who know and enjoy God more fully. Thank you so much for being part of it, and we can't wait to see you next time.